are you?
I'm fine. Happy to be here.
Yeah, nice to see you again in Ukraine. Yeah. This is the second time we're making an interview with you. For those of you who don't know, Fermín is the creator and the CEO of the biggest, I guess, race, swimming in open water, OCEANMAN, and a person with a lot of integrity. So that's why I would like to talk to you about OCEANMAN and the role of the OCEANMAN in the war between Russia and Ukraine, and integrity and some internal things like a traits of character which CEO of such organization, well known as your organization, and not easy decision when you have to decide on which side of the conflict you're supposed to be. The short explanation about the place we are now. Today, this is the first day of the race in Ukraine, international race in Kyiv. We don't have, during the war now, many international events, I would say 0. And this is, if I'm not mistaken, in Kyiv, first international sport event. So thank you for coming. But why we're not in the beach, we're in the restaurant. I'm not gonna name the restaurant, you know, it will not be like as advertising. But this is the place on Obolon, and this restaurant prepared every day 3,000 portions for the Kyiv territorial defense and all the people who needed to find some food in the very first weeks of the Russian invasion to Ukraine. So I have a few questions for you.
Let's go.
And the first question, 24th of February last year, the very first day of when the war started. How did you get the information about that? What was your feeling when you heard that war started in Ukraine?
Actually, this question remember me one of the worst moments of my life because my wife is Ukrainian, and we were in that time in Greece. The day before, February 23, we were almost awake, waiting for the news, because it was something unbelievable, but we were thinking that it would be possible. So we were awake, but nothing happens in 23. But the night of 24, it was the day when we had to fly from Athens to Spain. And I woke up before Bogdana at 5. And the first thing that I did was to unlock the telephone, and what I saw is like Russia invaded Ukraine. So I can remember every second what happened. So I looked at Bogdana, she was sleeping, and I was thinking like, fuck, it's the last seconds of his life that she's going to be sleeping well. After that, she woke up, she saw that, imagine the circumstances, like we couldn't connect with his family, and also we had a long flight. So this flight of 4 hours from Athens to Madrid, it was probably the worst 4 hours of our lives, because we worked without news. And when we landed, we tried to contact again, so it was something like, I remember it with a lot of pain.
What you started to do then? Like your next decisions, ideas, implementation of these ideas as a person and as a CEO of the OCEANMAN?
Well, to put this in context, I have to say that in that period we had 4 races in Russia. I was traveling to Russia often since 2016. We had races over there since that date. And Russia was one of our bigger clients, so we had more or less 6,000 swimmers from Russia, the same number we had from Ukraine. And so what happened in the first, when we passed the shock, in the first 24 hours, I said to Bogdana, look, we need to do something. Because the first reaction was to fly to Ukraine and fight. And I was stopped here because she wanted to join the army. So, and the feeling like what we can do from Spain. So I said, look, we have an international organization, and we need to take decisions. So it's first how we can help, and then the decisions that we are going to take with Russia. At the beginning, I was afraid, not about the business, It was because during that period of years traveling to Russia, I made a lot of friends there. And I said, okay, let's go to divide. So I would try to convince Russians, because at the beginning we were in contact with them, try to see what is the feeling and how the situation could change inside. So most of them told us, like, we are against the invasion, this is something unfair, but Russia is full of people with propaganda in their minds. So, and Bogdana, she was trying to help Ukrainians, connecting all our community around the world with the refugees, so trying to help, because it was super fast. So we were thinking, like, in 3 days, all will be destroyed. So that was, so I took it, I don't remember, like 2-3 days after that, we were monitoring what international organization they were doing, but I think that we were one of the first who decided to cut directly with Russia, so we canceled all the events, and but we didn't cut the relation, so we just say, like, all races are canceled for the moment, and let's see. After that, we introduced, like, new rules and new position, but at the beginning it was that I just cut it and tried to convince them. Like, you can imagine, like, we couldn't convince anyone to rebel against the regime.
Comparing to some international companies who are still doing business with Russia, like more than 500 days of the war, and still these companies are there present in Russia, they are making their business in Russia, they're earning money. So yeah, that was a cool decision. You've told that you had a rule, the new rule for the people from Russian Federation, in order to participate in other places in international races, they had to sign a paper that they are against the war or something. Can you just specify to tell us a bit about this paper they have to sign?
Yeah, first, like a company, why we decided to cut with this is, like, we can do business with a country that is paying taxes when you pay taxes to the government take that money and use it for the war. So make business with Russia means, like, basically paying the invasion. So it has no sense. So with people is the same. So due to international law, we can ban anyone because of their nationality. But what we don't want is people who, with their jobs and their business, they are paying same. So at least we wanted to remove their conscience about what is happening, so make them feel a little bit uncomfortable with the things that they are doing. So, man, if you are against and you are paying taxes, at least you can do something. But if they don't have any consequence, what they are going to do? They continue with their life. So I'm against, but I'm going to be 25 years in jail if I say something. Yeah, but in life you need to be brave. So in the place where we are, where it's a matter of time, like history will judge what happened. So we have recently what happened in the Second World War. So at the end, all Germans were judges. Yeah. All them were guilty about that, if they could do anything. So now it's time to do something.
And you had some conflict with some officials in that countries where you were making these Russian athletes sign these papers. Yep.
So returning to the question, it's so we create, like we can ban anyone. So we create a document basically saying, like, we don't want anyone who support the war. So in that document we are not saying anything like complicated or strange. Basically, like, I don't support the war, I'm against the invasion, and that's it. But some Russians treat it like it was a document that it was an attack to Russia. Basically say that I'm against the war. Nothing strange in that document. So we try to make them sign it, and at least if you support the war, we don't want you. We want nice people. Obviously, probably in Russia, there is nice people that there is against and want to do something. So, oh, come on, we are here to support you. You can do something. You can create a revolution. You can do whatever. Because if not, history is going to judge you.
Yeah, definitely so. Kyiv race. As I mentioned, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the very first international race in Ukraine from the beginning of the full-scale war. how did you make this decision? I'm sure that was not the easy one. And to arrive by yourself actually to the country where the war is.
It was easy decision to be honest, because just when we couldn't imagine that it would be possible, but we received a call from Vlasta Sokolova, that is our partner here, and she told us like, look, we had the possibility to do the race. She is even more brave than me. She told me, let's go to do it in Odessa as well. But we say, yeah, calm down, because Odessa is full of mines and probably it's a little bit complicated. But when she said, we can do something, we are doing races where Ukrainians are arriving, and we are receiving a lot of messages like, thank you for doing this, because it's like an island of happiness in the middle of the things that we are living in Ukraine. So it was easy. So we said, yes, let's go. Let's go in, and I didn't allow myself to have fear. You know, like what I can't say that I have fear or I'm not going to do it, because millions of Ukrainians are living like permanent selling. We have a lot of friends in the front line, living kids, families, and that's to be brave. I don't have the right that I'm brave. I don't have. So just I did the minimum. So we will do more things if it's possible.
But hopefully next year we will have a race in Odessa.
Yeah, and Crimea as well.
Yeah, in 1 year or 2 years, hopefully so. What do you think, from your point of view, what your personal parts of character, your personal strengths of character, helps you to make such decisions, not easy one, like to cancel races in Russia, to cancel business, to come to Ukraine, except bravery, of course. We've talked about courage, that such a person is supposed to be the courage one in order to overcome the fear, which is natural when you are doing things like that. Maybe something else.
First of all, is ethic. So I try to be a true person that is loyal to my values. So I always say, like, for example, money for me, it's not a value. There are millions of things in life that are more important than money. So what I try to do is like, even looks like, for example, for my ex-Russian friends, like I took a part like in a war, like, but look, this is not an equal war. So Ukrainians and the entire world, we were living peacefully. No one could think about like the situation. Like 2 years ago, we said to someone like, this is going to happen. It's like a script of a movie. No one will believe it. So it's normal things. So like you know, like if you are out and you see what's happening. So what I was doing is the right things that I have to do. So I didn't cancel the races in Russia because I'm against Russians, or this is Russophobic, like this is the favorite word that some of them in the other side, like we are not against, we don't hate them. We are trying to help to the people that we know, the people that we love, the country that it's a normal country, and it's destroyed. Not just Ukraine, it's destroyed all Europe. All the values that we have, all that it was constructed for years and years. We are the nest of the civilization in Europe. So we have like true values, and we are living happily. Obviously, every country has their own problems, but this amount of crazy things that happen in Ukraine. So and I assume it's not a matter of being brave or just. I think like I took the right decisions according with my values and the right things that a human being need to do.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. The last question. What would you like to tell to Ukrainian people, or even maybe not only Ukrainian people, who are watching this video?
I said today in front of all of our streamers, like first of all, like I came here to give in person a message. One is to say thank you, because this madness is stopped here. The front line is the line that divides the dark side and the light. And if this line is broke, will affect everyone. So thank you for being that part, and thanks to the Army of Ukraine for be this. And like from outside can sound like the army is like a professional army, like with super well equipment, like people with career. But I know people, and I know that there are normal people with kids, with normal life, with teachers, architects, doctors, that they couldn't imagine like to be there. So we are with them. We are here to say to everyone, to all Ukrainians, like I'm a representative about what Europe is saying. Like we are with you. We are supporting you, and what I can say in my personal part and my company is like we are going to support until the end. So wherever it's needed, we are here to help, and you are not alone. So even you can go out and you can feel what is happening outside, and our commitment, like OCEANMAN, is continue spreading the information, the real information about what is happening here, and putting real name and faces. Because sometimes when you are out, you see the news and you don't connect it with reality. But when you are here and you know the personal stories of everyone, it's different. So our commitment is to continue explaining to our community and to the world what is happening here.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.